welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be diving into the history of global communication.
Okay.
From like the very first electrical impulses, crackling across telegraph wires,
Yeah.
to the voices that traveled through Alexander Graham Bell's telephone.
Right.
You've given us a whole stack of sources on this,
Yeah.
and it gets really fascinating.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's what's interesting to me is how these inventions they weren't just about like sending messages.
Right.
They reshaped the very fabric of societies,
Yeah.
influencing warfare, diplomacy, and even the way businesses operated on like a global scale.
Yeah, it's like the world suddenly shrunk.
Yeah.
And we're going to trace that transformation.
Okay.
Starting with Samuel Morse and his incredible Morse code.
Fascinating guy.
Yeah, and then we'll hear about those unsung heroes, the telegraph operator,
Right.
and even touch on the shadowy world of cryptography and how it all started.
Yeah, and we'll connect those dots all the way to the digital age and the internet, and even try to peek into the future of how we'll connect in the coming decade.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
So the telegraph, before we had smartphones and the internet, this was the original instant message, right?
Exactly, yeah. And it's a story that starts with Samuel Morse.
Okay.
And he wasn't just an inventor.
Yeah.
He was a man driven by deep personal loss.
Oh.
The death of his wife
Wow.
fueled this desire to bridge the vast distances that separated people in those days.
So it was almost like a personal mission for him.
Absolutely, yeah. And that mission led him to create Morse code.
Right.
This ingenious system of dots and dashes that could be transmitted over wires using electricity.
Wow.
Think about it before the telegraph.
Yeah.
The fastest way to send a message across continents was by ship.
Right.
At the mercy of winds and weather.
We take instant communication for granted today.
Totally.
It's hard to even grasp how different things were back then.
It's hard to imagine the telegraph changed everything.
Suddenly, messages could zip across continents in minutes.
Wow.
Imagine the impact that had on warfare.
Yeah.
Commanders could direct troops in real time.
Right.
Governments could respond to crises far more quickly.
It's like the world suddenly woke up and
Yeah.
started moving at a much faster pace.
Yeah, and that pace had ripple effects.
Right.
Diplomacy changed because negotiations could happen more quickly.
Right.
Global commerce exploded as businesses could communicate and make transactions in real time.
We can't forget about those telegraph operators, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They were the human link in this technological revolution.
Right.
I was reading about how skilled they had to be
Yeah.
deciphering those clicks and clacks, often in really difficult conditions.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
They were the unsung heroes of the telegraph era.
Yeah.
Working long hours in cramped offices,
Right.
translating those dots and dashes into vital information. Some even risked their lives, working through storms or shipwrecks.
To keep those lines of communication open.
Their dedication is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
It really highlights how vital this new form of communication had become.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it also reminds us that even the most groundbreaking technology relies on human skill and resilience.
Speaking of human ingenuity, we can't leave out cryptography.
No, of course not.
I'm thinking of those classic spy movies
Right.
with secret messages being sent in Morse code.
Yeah.
Was that really happening back then?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
The telegraph made secure communication possible.
Right.
But it also spawned a whole new world of code making and code breaking.
Right.
Governments and militaries were suddenly in a race to create unbreakable code.
Yeah.
And the stakes were incredibly high.
It's like something out of a spy thriller.
It really is, yeah.
You had these brilliant minds battling it out in the shadow,
Yeah.
trying to decipher secret messages that could influence the outcome of wars or diplomatic negotiations.
Exactly. Yeah. And those code breakers played a pivotal role in history, often working behind the scenes,
Right.
but their work could have enormous consequences.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about the impact they had.
So the telegraph connected the world,
Right.
but then Alexander Graham Bell came along
Yeah.
and wanted to make it possible to hear each other across those distances.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Bill's story is intriguing because, unlike Morse, his path to invention was tangled up with intense rivalry.
Good.
He wasn't the only one working on transmitting sound over wires.
Right.
There was Elisha Gray, for instance,
Okay.
who developed a very similar device at almost the same time.
So it was a race to the patent office?
It was incredibly close.
Wow.
Bell ultimately secured the patent in 1870,
Good.
but the controversy surrounding the invention persisted for years.
But even with the patent,
Yeah.
the telephone didn't just appear overnight.
Yeah, it didn't.
It still had a long way to go before it became what we know it as today.
That's where figures like Thomas Edison come in.
Right.
He wasn't content to let Bell have all the glory. Edison saw the potential of the telephone, but he wanted to improve it.
Okay.
He developed a much more sensitive microphone,
Right.
which dramatically improved the clarity of telephone conversation.
It's interesting how rivalry and collaboration seem to go hand in hand when it comes to groundbreaking invention.
It often is. It's often a mix of both, you know?
Right.
These inventors were pushing each other,
Yeah.
competing and learning from each other,
Right.
which ultimately drove the technology forward.
And the impact of the telephone was just as profound as the telegraph, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It completely transformed how people interacted.
Yeah, suddenly you could have real-time conversations with people across countries and continents.
Right.
It revolutionized business, allowing for faster deals and more efficient collaboration.
Right.
Families separated by distance could hear each other's voices, something unimaginable before.
It's hard to overstate the social impact.
Yeah.
It changed the way we express emotions,
Right.
how we build relationships,
Yeah.
even how we handle emergency.
Yeah.
We take it for granted now.
Totally.
But imagine the first time you could call for help in a crisis
Right.
and have someone respond instantly.
It's a shift we can barely comprehend today.
Yeah.
And as with the telegraph, the early telephone faced its own set of challenges.
Okay.
Noise and interference were major issues.
Right.
And building out the infrastructure, those vast networks of telephone lines,
Yeah.
took time and resources.
But it seems like people were so eager to connect.
Oh yeah.
They were willing to overlook those early limitations.
Absolutely. It tapped into a fundamental human need,
Right.
the desire to communicate, to share experiences, to bridge the gaps between us.
And that need would only intensify as technology continued to advance.
Precisely, and those advancements came rapidly.
Right.
From the rotary dial to touch-tone phones.
Yeah.
Each innovation made the telephone more user-friendly and accessible.
Right.
But it was the mobile phone that truly revolutionized personal communication, allowing us to carry that connection with us wherever we go.
And that's a whole other chapter in this story of global communication.
It is.
A story that leads us inevitably to the internet.
A story we'll dive into after a short break.
Stay with us.
Yes. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Okay, so we've covered the telegraph and the telephone.
Right.
But now it's time to tackle the behemoth.
Yeah.
The one that really changed everything, the internet.
Yeah, it's hard to overstate its impact. And
Right.
It's reshaped commerce, entertainment, education, even how we form
It
relationships.
feels like the internet has always been there.
I know, right?
But its origins are surprisingly recent, right?
Yeah, believe it or not,
Yeah.
the internet we know today started in the depths of the Cold War.
Wow.
Back in the 1960s, the U.S. Department of Defense was obsessed with this idea
Okay.
of a communication system that could survive a nuclear attack.
So it was all about security and resilience.
Exactly. They couldn't rely on a centralized system
Right.
that could be wiped out with one strike.
What they needed was a decentralized network.
Okay.
Where if one part went down, the rest could keep functioning.
And that's how ARPANET was born.
That's right.
Okay.
ARPANET, which stood for Advanced Research Projects Agency Network,
Okay.
was the precursor to the internet.
Right.
It was this network of computers that could talk to each other using a new technology called packet switching.
I've heard of packet switching,
Yeah.
but never really understood how it worked.
Well, it was revolutionary.
Okay.
Instead of sending data in a continuous stream,
Yeah.
like a telephone call,
Right.
packet switching broke data down into small packets
Okay.
that could travel independently across the network.
Kind of like sending a message in pieces
Exactly.
and then reassembling it at the other end.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
And the beauty of it was that these packets could be routed around damaged or congested parts of the network.
Okay.
It's like having multiple backup routes for your information.
That makes it incredibly resilient.
Yeah, especially if you're worried about something like a nuclear attack disrupting communication.
Exactly.
Wow.
ARPANET was a huge success in that sense.
Right.
Researchers at different universities and government labs could suddenly share information and collaborate much more easily.
But ARPANET was still a long way from the internet we know today.
Yes.
What were those key steps that bridged the gap?
One of the biggest leaps forward was TCP/IP,
Okay.
a set of protocols,
Right.
essentially rules,
Right.
that allowed different types of computers to connect and talk to each other.
So like a universal language for computers.
Precisely.
Yeah.
TCP/IP enabled the creation of networks,
Wow.
all interconnected and able to communicate seamlessly.
Right.
This was absolutely essential for the internet to grow beyond its academic and military origins.
And then came the World Wide Web.
Yes.
I remember the early days of dial-up modems
Oh, yeah.
and those clunky web browsers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The web was a game changer.
Right.
It was the brainchild of Tim Berners-Lee.
Okay. A British scientist at CERN,
Okay.
the European Organization for Nuclear Research.
Wait, so the internet and the World Wide Web aren't the same thing?
You've hit on a key point.
Okay.
The internet is the underlying infrastructure.
Right.
The network of networks.
Okay.
The World Wide Web is built on top of that.
Okay.
It's a way of accessing information.
Right.
That's stored on servers all over the world.
So, like the difference between the highway system
Exactly.
and the cars driving on it.
A perfect analogy.
Okay.
Berners-Lee created HTML,
Right.
the language used to create web pages.
Okay.
And HTTP, the protocol that allows us to access those pages.
Okay.
And crucially, He made those technologies open and freely available.
That open source approach was huge.
Oh, absolutely.
It meant anyone could contribute to the growth of the web.
Right.
And that's precisely what happened.
Exactly. In the early 1990s,
Yeah.
the web exploded.
Right.
Suddenly, anyone with a computer and a modem.
Could access this vast and growing library of information.
Wow.
News, entertainment, research, you name it. It was all there.
It was a revolution in how we accessed information and shared ideas.
It really was.
It really felt like a democratization of knowledge.
It did, but those early days weren't without their challenges.
Right.
The internet was slow, connections were unreliable,
Yeah.
navigating the web could be confusing.
Right.
There were also growing concerns about security and privacy.
It's interesting how those same concerns are still with us today,
I know.
even as the technology has advanced.
It's an ongoing evolution.
Yeah.
As the internet matured,
Right.
we got broadband connections, wireless networking, smartphones,
Yeah.
all making it faster, more accessible, and more mobile.
And that accessibility led to an explosion of new applications.
Right.
Email, instant messaging, social media, online gaming, you name it.
Yeah.
It seemed like every aspect of life was moving
It
online.
was a period of rapid innovation.
Right.
The internet became this powerful platform for connecting with people, sharing information, and conducting business.
Right.
And all of this was happening on a global scale.
It's incredible to think about how quickly it all unfolded.
I know, right?
We went from those clunky dial-up connections
Yeah.
to having the world at our fingertips within a couple of decades.
And that pace of change hasn't slowed down.
Right.
Today, the internet connects billions of people worldwide.
It's become this essential utility.
Absolutely.
Like electricity or water.
It is.
We rely on it for work, communication, entertainment, even basic necessity.
Yeah, and that reliance has both positive and negative aspects, right?
Right.
The internet has given us incredible opportunity,
Yeah.
but it's also created new challenges.
Complex landscape.
It is.
Let's delve into how the internet has impacted specific areas of our lives.
Right.
Starting with the world of business.
It's a great place to start.
We're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive.
Yeah, into the evolution of global communication.
Right. We've come a long way from those crackling telegraph lines.
We really have.
Right. And now we're stepping into a realm where science fiction starts to blur with reality.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Right. Cloud computing,
Yeah.
the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
It's almost overwhelming to think about.
It's a lot to unpack, but it's also incredibly exciting, you know?
Right.
These technologies they're reshaping our world in some really profound ways.
Okay, so cloud computing.
Right.
It sounds so abstract.
Yeah.
What is it exactly?
Well, at its core, cloud computing is about accessing computing power,
Okay.
storage, and software over the internet.
Okay.
Think of it as a vast shared pool of resources that you can tap into whenever you need them.
So instead of having all your data and applications stored on your personal computer,
Yeah.
it's out there somewhere in this cloud.
Exact. It's like having a giant virtual hard drive
Wow.
and software library that you can access from anywhere on any device.
That sounds incredibly convenient.
It is.
But also kind of scary.
Yeah.
What about security and privacy?
Yeah, those are valid concerns.
Right.
And the cloud computing industry has invested heavily in security measures to address them. But like any technology, there are always risks.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like cloud computing is changing the way businesses operate too.
It is. It's a game changer for businesses.
Yeah.
Especially small ones.
Right.
You know, instead of having to invest in expensive hardware and software up front,
Right.
they can simply pay for cloud services as they need them, scaling up or down as their needs change.
That kind of flexibility would have been unimaginable just a few decades ago.
It's true. It's a testament to how quickly technology evolved.
Yeah.
Cloud computing is also driving innovation, making it easier for developers to create and deploy new applications and services.
That's like this invisible infrastructure
Yeah.
that's powering so much of our digital world. It really is. Yeah.
Now let's step into the world of the Internet of Things.
Okay.
Probably heard the term, but it can still sound like something out of science fiction.
Yeah, it does have a futuristic ring to it.
Right. It's like a world where everyday objects come to life
Yeah.
and start communicating with each other.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
The Internet of Things, or IoT for short,
Right.
is about connecting physical objects to the internet.
Oh, okay.
I mean, everything from, household appliances to industrial machines.
So we're talking about refrigerators that order groceries when you're running low,
Yeah.
or cars that drive themselves.
Those are just a couple of examples.
Right.
The possibilities are almost limitless now.
Right.
Imagine smart cities where traffic lights adjust in real time to optimize traffic flow.
Wow.
Or wearable devices that monitor our health and alert us to potential problems.
That sounds incredibly transformative,
Yeah.
but also a bit unsettling. What about the implications for privacy?
If everything is connected and collecting data, who has access to that information?
Right. It's a valid concern. As the IoT grows, we're going to need to grapple with those ethical and societal questions.
But despite those concerns, the potential benefits of the IoT are hard to ignore.
They are. It has the power to revolutionize healthcare,
Right.
transportation, agriculture, manufacturing. Virtually every aspect of our lives.
This is like the next stage in the evolution of the internet,
Yeah.
moving beyond computers and smartphones to encompass the entire physical world.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the future of telecommunication itself.
Okay.
Artificial intelligence and machine learning are already starting to transform how we communicate.
I've heard about things like AI-powered chatbots
Yeah.
and virtual assistant, but it's hard to imagine how these technologies will shape the future.
Well, we're still in the early stages,
Right.
but the possibilities are mind-boggling, Imagine a world where your phone can anticipate your needs,
Wow.
translate languages in real time, and filter out spam and unwanted calls automatically.
That sounds almost magical.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then there's quantum communication,
Okay.
which has the potential to revolutionize how we transmit data.
Quantum communication. I have to admit, that's one I haven't heard much about.
It's a cutting-edge field that leverages the principles of quantum mechanics.
Wow.
The potential benefits are huge.
Okay.
Breakable encryption,
Right.
data transmission speeds that are orders of magnitude faster than anything we have today.
It sounds like we're on the verge of another major leap forward in communication technology.
It does feel that way.
Yeah.
And that's the exciting thing about this field.
Right.
It's constantly evolving, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
Rhea.
From those first hesitant dots and dashes of the telegraph
Right.
to the mind-blowing potential of artificial intelligence and quantum communication.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey
It really has.
through the history and future of global communication.
And for anyone who wants to delve even deeper into this topic,
Yes.
we highly recommend checking out the book From Telegraph to Telephone, The Evolution of Global Communication.
It's a great resource.
You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It's a must-read for anyone interested in how we connect and communicate.
So until next time, keep those lines of communication open.
Absolutely.